It's here. It's here. It's the holiday season. It is the holiday season. And Thanksgiving is days away. Christmas is right around the corner. And we're all ready to celebrate. And wouldn't you agree that after all we've been through this year, we need to celebrate? Wouldn't you like to spend time with family, put your feet under the table, and enjoy some good old homemade food for Thanksgiving, for Christmas? Wouldn't you just love to continue with the traditions of breaking a wishbone and, having fun and everybody sharing what they're thankful for? Well, this year is going to be different for a lot of us. It's going to be different for all of us in many respects, but we're still going to celebrate and we're still going to enjoy good food some kind of way during this holiday season. Our guest, Besida Cawthorn White, has a wealth of information when it comes to holiday traditions and the foods that we share and the camaraderie with family. Besida, good evening and welcome.
Well, hello, Mickey. Good evening to you, and it's great to be here.
Yes, indeed. You are a genealogist, a historian, and an all around knowledgeable person of these traditional celebrations. Share with us a little bit about your history in that regard.
Well, I want to share with you, our African American traditions have often been oral and passed on from generation to generation in practice. The idea of reducing them to writing, though, is something fairly relatively recent. So I want to share something that I discovered about probably 20 years ago, and that is a 1963 book written by a woman whose name is Charlamagne Rollins, and she was a children's librarian at the Chicago Public Library. And in this book called Christmas Gift, GIF without the T, she described the game of Christmas Gift that was played by enslaved Africans. And it's interesting that Rollins said many times that she wrote this book because she could not find a single book that documented Christmas traditions for African Americans. And so she included stories, poems, narratives by various writers like Langston Hughes, Paul Laurence Dunbar, Frederick Douglass. And so Christmas Gift, and I'd never heard that term, Christmas GIF, until I read Ms. Rollins' book. So this was a surprise game that was played by enslaved people on Christmas Day. So it went like this. Two people meeting for the first time that day
Mhm.
would compete to be who could be the first person to call out Christmas gift. According to Rollins, the loser happily paid, forfeited, gave a simple present. Now, this is, on enslaved people on a plantation. So it may have been a Christmas tea cake or a
Mm.
handful of nuts. And she says that it was more pleasure in losing and having to give a present than in giving, although folks comically protested. And so, according to Rollins, this was something that started in the quarters of the enslaved and spread to the big house, and so that everybody did it. And interestingly enough, culinary historian Michael Twitty also talks about Christmas gift. And he describes it as it took place in his own family at Oak Forest Plantation, which is in eastern North Carolina. And he says that his research shows that this took place broadly in the slave communities, whether from Maryland to Texas, from Missouri to Florida. But interestingly enough, his telling of it has a different twist. In his description, the first person to demand the gift won the prize. So Trity goes on to say that this, of course, it's food related. He goes on to say that the gift might have been a taste of oranges, which you hadn't had all year, grapefruit, peppermints, or chocolate, or the really lucky children might have gotten a small toy. And then adults got tobacco, new clothing, such as scarves or kerchiefs, jugs of rum even, or extra molasses and butter, lard, flour. and the flour was consumed so infrequently that it was referred to as seldom. The flour was actually called seldom because they didn't get it so often. So it may be that this game was played differently in different places, but I just thought that was fascinating that Charlemagne Rollins found the need to reduce that to writing to make sure that we would know. And so I invite you to look for her book in the library. It's long out of print. But then to follow Michael Twitty, his book is The Cooking Gene. His blog is Afro Culinaria, and he's always got a lot to say about our cooking traditions.
You know, it's very interesting when you speak of the gift. It seems that even then, for holidays and for gifts, we gave food. Do you know, for Christmas, for Thanksgiving, even for birthdays to this day, I often give food for celebrations. Y'all bake a cake or bake some cookies or something like that. So this has been going on for a long time. That is a great reference way back when, the game of the gift, GIF.
Yeah, we are a food-centered culture for sure. Absolutely food centered. And then, some writers since then, you see on your screen African American holiday traditions, and that's a book written in 2000 by writer Antoinette Broussard, and she covers celebrations throughout the year. Heavily on Christmas, Thanksgiving, New Year's, but throughout the year, and she includes all those different holidays that are celebrated in our various cultures across the diaspora, whether it's Ramadan or Carnival.
Mhm.
And she talks about not only her experiences and her family experiences, but she talks to other families. She interviews them and shares various aspects, largely food, but also their decor, their writings, their poetry. And so it's just a wonderful, and some of you probably can't see that so well, but you see a family in that cover, African American holiday traditions. And if you look in very closely, the mother in the family, the mother figure is someone that many of us in Richmond would recognize. It's Marie Goodman Hunter. And so she is on the cover of that book.
Yes.
And in that same vein, Jessica Harris, who's a food writer and cookbook writer and food historian. She's written a book called A Kwanzaa Keepsake. And so she, as we started to celebrate Kwanzaa in the late 60s, then she has moved us through recipes from across the continent and throughout the diaspora. And of course, we know that as we have blended, many of us seamlessly blend Kwanzaa, Christmas, all of the celebrations into one.
Sounds like a lot of celebrating going on. It's one thing about African Americans, for so long, we were, I guess, put down, people did not think we could rise, but we rose and we rose in our efforts to celebrate and our efforts of traditions and in our efforts of the foods that we made, the celebrations that we did. And the things we did just because we could, and it was what we had. A lot of times we didn't have a whole lot. And it's really interesting because even though we didn't have a whole lot, we had a lot. I remember back in the day when when we were growing up, we did not have a lot of money, but we never missed a meal. And it was always interested that when we would have chicken and gravy, a lot of times my dad would get the chicken and we would get the gravy, and we had the biscuits to sop it up. We didn't know any different. We were happy, we were fed, and we were healthy. So that is really interesting, and it is a testament to how we survive because we make do with what we have, and we are oh so happy with it and so happy to have it. Now that brings me to some of the traditions that you have had in your family. Now you have been documenting your family traditions and Christmas celebrations for a very long time, and you're actually the family historian, so you really keep track of things, don't you?
I keep track of it. And of course, it helps that I was raised by the griot. My mother, Gladys Cawthorn White, kept virtually everything. And then
Uh-huh.
she told the stories again and again and again. So I can tell you stories from 1860. And it's interesting, she told stories, and for a long time I thought they were things that she knew, but then I realized that she was talking about things that had been told to her. Bonnie mentioned the uh, title of our family cookbook, Help Yourself, There's a God's Mighty Plenty. And she always said, Bruh Dennis said that, and that was her great great uncle. Well, I thought, when I was young, that was somebody she knew. Well, Bruh Dennis was born in 1846, but she knew as the stories were told again and again, and she told them to us. And so, therefore, we remember so much of it. But yeah, my family does have some long-standing traditions. My father was one of 9 children. And so he and his siblings and their spouses in the mid 50s started to get together every Christmas. And we called it family Christmas dinner. It was never held on Christmas Day because people wanted to be, at home for Santa Claus, so to speak. But it was
Mm-hmm.
26th to 27th, whichever day was convenient to the host. And this was facilitated. This family, my father's family, the surname White family, is from King and Queen County, Virginia. And although only 2 of the siblings stayed in King and Queen, getting together was easy by the fact that no one had really gone further than the DC, Maryland area. So it was a day trip to get together in one house or the other. And of course, there was always a ton of food. I mean, just an overwhelming amount of food. The traditions, and the earliest documented one of these is 1957. We think it started in 1955, but maybe it was 55, 56. And anyway, so traditions evolved over the years. Early on, everyone gave the children a Christmas gift. And so we all got a gift. And so you leave the Christmas dinner with this huge shopping bag that you then would take you several days to look at and see all the gifts you had. Later on, as it evolved, we drew names. At a point, we even said, no, we're going to take that money that we would have spent and give it to the family home church down in King and Queen County. And then as it evolved one year, and let me just picture on your screen is 1957 White Family Christmas Dinner. And so the relatively little person in the middle of the picture is me. And so I was just about 10 years old on that picture. And they're my aunts-in-law, my grandmother in the foreground, and then my first cousin, who's a little boy and we're the 2 oldest in our generation. So most of the others, my first cousins weren't born yet, but that was 1957. And so there's the documentation. And bring up the next slide, if you will. So we can see how this evolved. So this is an invitation. You're invited to the Kwanzaa Karamu Feast, and the year is 1996. And so we had evolved this a little bit. It may be a little hard to see, but the Christmas dinner was a Kwanzaa celebration. So we have blended those traditions, and we continue to do it. And we've done it these 60 plus years. And of course, things have changed. The original, there were 18 of them, my father's siblings and their spouses. Now there's one of his siblings left. My father passed away at almost 100 years old in 2012, but he's got one brother left, Andrew Jackson White, and then there are 2 spouses left. So that original 18, we have 3. And lo and behold, some of us have become the elders, which is kind of surprising anyway. But anyway, we now have moved on to 1 and 2 more generations. So it continues. The institution is strong. We have another picture of it here that we'll see in a second. That's more recent, 2016 picture. And we get the next slide.
There it is.
Okay, so that is 2016, and that's a fraction of the persons who were present, but that's me with some of my first cousins and first cousins in law. And so it's going strong, and we're going to do it this year, and it's going to be different. It's definitively going to be different. And it's going to be virtual. We have lots of practice because we've been holding family Zoom celebrations almost every Friday night since the beginning of the pandemic. So we are seasoned Zoom participants. And so we thought, well, how can we eat together? We can't eat together. How can we include food? So we are going to be exchanging recipes by sometime next week so that family members can incorporate other person's recipes into their holiday menus. And we will come together virtually. As always, we will pray and give thanks. And as always, we will sing. We have some powerful voices in our family, and those persons are working out the logistics for this virtual sing along. Proposed is a slideshow that might show us some of the 60 plus year history of this event. And so, although disappointed that we won't be in person, we are somewhat, I guess, the silver lining of the pandemic cloud is that because we have come together virtually every week, then we have conversed and gotten to know each other better than we ever would have without the pandemic. And so that's a part of the silver lining. And we're going to make this virtual Christmas dinner silver lining as well. And so it's exciting. Then I might want to share with you some of my, now that's my larger family, my uncles and aunts and first cousins. But then in my household, we have a lot of things we do that have become our traditions. And probably 45 or more years ago than that, a coworker gave me a recipe for a pecan and raisin cake. And so I made it once or twice, but then my husband decided that it was his thing. And so for more than 40 years, Philip Bladen has made his famous golden raisin and pecan cake. And sometimes he's made as many, he makes them in miniature. He decided that that was the best way they would cook. And then he gives them, he's made as many as 50 in some years. And so that continues to go on. And he starts searching for pecans. He's got suppliers in North Carolina, and he's got ways and means that he is able to hopefully get the pecans other than buy them at Costco. But that is one of our family traditions. And then, you know, I'm a foodaholic. I really am. And one of my things that I just really dearly love is cheesecake. I am a cheesecake enthusiast. In fact, in our family cookbook that Bonnie's mentioned, I probably have 5 cheesecake recipes. I mean, it's from sweet potato cheesecake to white chocolate cheesecake to pumpkin and rum cheesecake. And some of those recipes are well, they're so good, but they are as unhealthy as they are good. And so, in fact, one of them has, of course, the whole fat cream cheese. Well, they all have that. And then there are all these eggs. One has extra egg yolks. And so it's the kind of thing that you just can't eat on a regular basis. And so I only make it when there's a lot of folks around to eat it because I have no willpower. So I know I'm going to eat it. So this year, since we will be restricted to our own households, I won't be making the cheesecake. I'll hold it on for the next time.
Not at all, not even a little one?
Well, you know, not even a little one because I would eat it. Now, what I have done, and talk about this, is sometimes, and we talk about how all of these wonderful recipes that we document, many of them are not healthy, and you can't eat that way on a routine basis. And so there, you know, I might make it with fat-free cream cheese, but sometimes I say, well, let me just not do that and have it the real way, the rare time that I have it.
Because
But I do,
that's what the recipe called for, the real way.
yeah, the real way. But I do want to share with you another really fun tradition in my household. So probably about maybe 40 years ago, everything is 40 years ago, it seems. But anyway, my father and I decided to make a custom, bespoke, if you will, tablecloth for our dining room table. So of course it's red, and we measured it so that it comes to the floor, and it was quite an effort because the table is oval. So when you try to cut out an oval cloth and get it to fall to the floor correctly, well, anyway, we got that done. So my daughter, Lauren Bladen White, decided, just was fascinated, even as a little girl, by this tablecloth to the floor. So, and it only goes on the table at Christmas time. So the tablecloth became her homie. In other words, it's a playhouse called the homie. And so early on, from probably she was little more than a toddler, she would be sleeping at least one night during the holidays under the table. And of course, you wouldn't want to do that alone. And she was an only child. So that meant that each one of us slept under the table at some point. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, I asked my husband earlier tonight, did you ever sleep in the home? And he said, of course I did. You had to sleep in the home. And lots of four-legged members of the family as well. And one thing that happened really funny is we had a visitor early one morning, and we had not gotten up. And so the person came in, and here's my 75-year-old plus mother having to come out from under the dining room table, out of the homie, with guests present. And so we have fun with them. And the tablecloth will go on, and perhaps the cat will occupy. Maybe I'll get under there with him, but my daughter will be at her home, so she won't be. I have to laugh. I've just looked in the chat, and the person I'm talking about is fortunate that she had patient parents. But yeah, we went along, and my mother was ever the game player. My father slept in the home, so that's just one of our traditions that we just had a fun time with.
Basada, you showed a picture or a slideshow early on. I think it was in 1957, and it was you and you say your aunties.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering, when it came to preparing the food, did everybody make the foods at home and bring it to the celebration, or were there a whole lot of cooks in the kitchen cooking to make the celebration at the home where the celebration was going on? And did any of the men do the cooking back then?
Well, let me answer that in several parts. First of all, this event has evolved. And so, in the beginning, and for quite a few, I would say for, more than half of the 60 plus years, the host did the food. And so, then you cooked for 65 people. And of course, my house, so we are just, it's hard for us to cook for 10 people or for 5 people because it's just easier to cook for 20 or 30. So, we're very accustomed to doing food for 60 plus people. If you're cooking, just go on and cook. And so that's how, but then as people got busier, and you got, as some of my generation grew up, you had young working people who did not have time or perhaps the cooking skills, then things changed and it became a covered dish. And so it remains covered dish to this day. In fact, the host typically does the meats primarily, and so the host does maybe the core of the meal, I should say, but then everyone brings something. And so, of course, the challenge with that is getting everybody there on time because you got the bread and you get there an hour and a half late. That's kind of a problem. But anyway, so that's how that has evolved over the years. Now the men, probably not so much. I have to think about that, but it's interesting. Well, not so much, but then some. Of course, my husband cooks. He, always his cake, his this, and so he cooks. But of the older generation, probably not so much, although in my parents' home, my father did certain things. I mean, my mother never prepared a chicken for cooking. He took every, and he was meticulous about everything. He removed every bit of visible fat from that chicken,
Mm.
even with tweezers to pull that fat that's stuck down in the deep part of the chicken thigh. And so, yeah, so my father was probably involved in some prep, but he didn't do a lot of cooking, and his brothers, and I'm say this cautiously, probably did less than that. But anyway.
And one of our participants has a question, which is, if you were cooking for 65 people, when did you start cooking? Halloween?
Well, you just start a couple of days beforehand. I mean, it's not really that hard. If I'm gonna, I mean, well, in my household, and it's interesting because there were only two of us growing up, me and my sister. My mother never cooked. I didn't know turkeys came under 25 pounds, quite frankly. And so, we had a 14-pound turkey for a holiday recently. And my daughter said, I mean, that's a large chicken. But so we're just accustomed to cooking for a lot and to always having a plenty of food. Going back to the title of that cookbook, Help Yourself, There's a God's Mighty Plenty. I mean, you always had enough. We've had people to come in when we weren't, like on Christmas Day, we get this 5 people show up. We didn't know they were coming. And we had a 3-course meal at least that year. We had enough of the special soup I'd made. And, we just are accustomed to cooking in large quantities. So it's hard to sometimes to cook less.
So cooking just runs in the family, particularly traditional cooking when it comes to holidays and celebrations. So that is absolutely a wonderful thing. And I imagine that many of the younger generations, as things went on, started cooking from the recipes from the family cookbook as well, as far as bringing their covered dishes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am just so glad I was I guess the year was 1998, and I was in an airport somewhere west. I don't know whether I was in Denver, and I had time to kill in this airport, and I bought a magazine, and there was an article about someone who had done a family cookbook. And I thought, well, isn't that fascinating? And we had just had family reunion, which was every 2 years. And so I said, well, that's something we ought to do. So we worked on it. And so in 1990 is when I edited my first cookbook. And this is my father's family, the White family. And so we got those recipes down. And, so much to be said for getting what we just do. We just do it because we do it, and getting them down in writing. And so we were so happy to have done that. That was 1990, and that was a reunion of recipes, the White Family Cookbook. And then I thought, well, I've got all these different families, so maybe in my mother's family. So the Cawthon Brooks family, by 2000, or at least by 1998, we decided to do that. And that's when we get this marvelous title that comes from the person born in 1846, Help Yourself, There's a God's Mighty Plenty. Always, space for another at the table, always more food, and we can serve you. And so what is interesting is getting folks to submit recipes is challenging, to say the least. And one of the things is that even when folks mean to do it, then they just don't get around to it. But one of the things that makes it difficult is often the recipes have never been reduced to writing. So how much flour do you use? I asked my mother, she said, I put the flour in the sifter and I use as much as I need. Okay, so how to write a recipe when you use as much as you need? And of course, she goes into feel, she uses as much as she needs. So it's interesting. Back in, I guess, I'm not, maybe 2000, it must have been 1999. And Bonnie, you were actually working for Richmond newspapers then, I'm sure,
Mm.
when back with Louis Mahoney. And so they were doing a feature on recollections of your mother's cooking. And this was for Mother's Day. And so what happened is Louis Mahoney, the food editor, put the call out there and she didn't hear from any Black folks, And so she called me and said, can you help? And I was busy on deadline. So I said, well, would it work if somebody had a recollection of their grandmother's cooking? So she said, yeah, that'd be good. So I called my daughter, Lauren, and said, please talk to Louis Mahoney, do something with this. So she wrote in 20 minutes a most brilliant essay about her grandmother's pie crust. But now the problem was Louis Mahoney wanted the recipe in the news leader then. I don't know whether it was the news leader or the Times Dispatch, but anyway, we didn't have the recipe because it had never been reduced to writing. So we were in the process then of the final touches on the family cookbook. And so we said, we've got to have the recipe for the cookbook. So what I did was I went to the kitchen with my mother. She filled the sifter with flour. It's a 4-cup sifter, right? So she used what she needed, and I measured what was left and subtracted. And we go through the whole process of the liquid and all of
Okay.
that, and that's
Wow.
pie crust. So grandma's pie crust is wasn't in the newspaper because we didn't have it together then, but it's in the family cookbook and it's captured. And what is so fantastic is that now we have all these recipes, and most of those persons who contributed in 1990 to my father's family cookbook, those who contributed in 2000 to my mother's cookbook, most of them have gone to glory. And so we
Oh.
are just so delighted. I have one cousin whose mother now has dementia. And because she gave those recipes, then he has them and she's still with us, but she can't share them. And so it's something I'm always saying, okay, create your family cookbook, preserve those memories. I'll help you. I'll tell you what to do, but it's something worth doing. And we did the same thing for my church when it celebrated its sesquicentennial.
That is so nice. What great memories you have. One of our participants, Barbara, made a comment that she was truly enjoying this because it made her reflect on spending time in the kitchen cooking with her grandmother. So we're speaking with Besida Cawthorn-White, who is sharing family memories and traditions of how we celebrate in our families and how we enjoy traditions for Thanksgiving, for Christmas, and for celebrations as well. Now, Besida, you also have a collection of African American cooks who've written cookbooks. Is that true?
That is true. And it's interesting. Some time ago, and quite a while ago, we always collected cookbooks. I mean, my husband's a foodie, I'm a foodie. So, we always just had cookbooks. At a point, we were vegetarians, so we were collecting vegetarian cookbooks. And one day someone said to me, how many cookbooks in your African American cookbook collection? And I thought, okay, is that something I have? Do I have one of those? So I somehow didn't realize it. Then I realized, of course, as I was buying lots of cookbooks, I always bought the Black ones. And, there were not that many. This is kind of a new thing. Now I have hundreds. I do not know how many. I haven't cataloged them recently. That is a pandemic project that I've not gotten to yet, but they do all kinds of cookbooks. And the National Council of Negro Women is a leader in cookbooks. Not only did they do the 1990s era cookbook around the Black Family Reunion Cookbook, Celebrating Our Mother's Kitchens, the Black Family Dinner Quilt Cookbook, but actually they had done a cookbook many years before that I have. It's called the Historical Cookbook of the American Negro, published in 1958. So National Council of Negro Women under largely Dorothy Height, Richmond or Dorothy Height's direction was at the head of this game. And of course, what's interesting about the cookbooks is the food memories and the anecdotes, the food stories are just as important as the recipes. It's like the recipes are the heart of a cookbook, but the food memories and stories are much of its soul. I mean, that really is. I've had folks who said to me, well, I sit down and read this cookbook like I'm reading a novel. And it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting, the persons that I think pretty much started the genre that's a memoir kind of cookbook was Norma Jean and Carol Darden with Spoonbread and Strawberry Wine, which was published
Yeah.
about 1978. But they actually have Virginia roots, and they told all those family stories. And it's as much genealogy, family history as it is cookbook. And they got that started, and now we just have explosion of cookbooks. I mean, all over the celebrity chefs like our own Edna Lewis from Orange County, Virginia, Leah Chase from Dookie Chase, who's deceased now from Dookie Chase in New Orleans, and
Mm-hmm.
Carla Hall, B. Smith, who did several cookbooks and some of them on holiday celebrations, and Marcus Samuelson, who's done several, just got a new one out, and then so many food writers and his culinary historians have done books. You know, Jessica Harris, we've mentioned earlier, Michael Twitty, Tony Tipton Martin. And then the celebrity cookbooks are kind of fun as well.
But beside it,
Some are
can those
very,
celebrities really cook? Tell the truth. Can those celebrities really cook?
I can bet you Patty does.
Okay, well, yeah, yeah. I bet she can too.
Patty cooks now. I don't know whether you like her sweet potato pie at Walmart, but I think she cooks.
Yeah.
And so some
And
do,
her
but some,
greens as well.
yes, yes. But yeah, we cookbooks, George Foreman, Bobby Seale. T.D. Jakes has a cookbook. I don't know whether he cooks, but he has a cookbook. Pearl Bailey, Mahalia Jackson, Maya Angelou. I mean, the list goes on and on. And so there just
Hmm.
are so many. And of course, you know, the one thing is my husband, like I said, reads these books. Like he just sits down and he'll be reading a cookbook, just like he reads the dictionary. But anyway, um, you have to use them for inspiration, some of the traditional ones. You cannot eat that way all the time. I mean, there are so many of them that capture our tradition, are too high in saturated fat, too high in refined carbohydrate, too high in sugar. So use them on special occasions and then use them for inspiration. You know, we look at how we can, on a routine basis, do something similar. And then there are some folks who've done that. There's a little booklet called Down Home Healthy that actually published by the National Cancer Institute that takes the recipes of famous chefs, and I think Leah Chase is one of those, and they have modified them so that they're healthier. And
Hmm.
Patty LaBelle even has a
Patty LaBelle,
healthy
yeah,
cookbook, a low-fat cookbook.
yeah, yeah.
John L. Nash of Essence Magazine has a low-fat one. So there's, and then there are even vegetarian and vegan cookbooks. There's a young woman that I'm so impressed with. Her name is Jenny Claiborne, and her vegan cookbook is called Sweet Potato Soul. So there's just a lot out there. In fact, there's just so many new books. Now, one of the
Hmm.
ones that I like so much is, of course, the museum, the National Museum of African American History and Culture, called by some the Blacksonian, has this wonderful, wonderful food. And of course, unfortunately, they're closed right now, but
Yeah.
Sweet Home Cafe is the cookbook from the National Museum. And so, and it is really, really wonderful. I've made several of their recipes. There's just been a lot lately. Tony Tipton Martin's book, Jubilee, came out in 2019. And
Hmm.
this year, one of the things I've been doing while home is buying cookbooks. Um, Alexander Smalls is an opera singer turned restaurateur, and his newest book is called Meals, Music, and Muses, Muses. And so that's an exciting book. And then, of course, just in the past few weeks, literally about 10 days ago, Marcus Samuelson's new book has come out, The Rise, Black Cooks and the Soul of American Food. So there's just a whole lot out there, and it's exciting that when Black cookbooks were so hard to come by, few and far apart, and now there are so many, and so it's
Yeah.
fun.
And all available. I know that Patti LaBelle mentioned that she started cooking on the road when she would go on the road to perform, and she couldn't find the food she wanted. So she would always make sure she had a hotel that had a kitchen in it. And she started cooking her own food there. And then, she would invite the roadies and the band, and everybody would come in, and, she started cooking for everybody. So she cooked out of necessity for what she really wanted on the road, and went on to cook healthy because of her health situation. So Patty, yeah, she definitely does cook. And Marcus Samuelson, now this new book that he has written is basically about many of the, I guess, Black chefs. There it is. Yeah, Black chefs. And Poseidon's going to bring hers up now. And okay, I don't have mine yet. I got mine.
No, you got one coming.
Okay, thank you. But he is highlighting and spotlighting a lot of Black cooks who haven't gotten their just due. Is that what's in the book?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And he has he's not from this country. He grew up in Sweden, and but he has a remarkable sense of the diaspora and of African culture, African American culture, and apparently a very healthy respect for that. And so he is this wonderful because he's a star. He started at Aquavit, and then he now has Red Rooster. During the pandemic, he had the luxury to actually feed people, provide a food bank, and so but he's a star, and so it's great that he is giving some shining some light on some folks who have long labored in the vineyards and not gotten that kind of exposure. So it's just really great that he is realizes that that's what he should be doing and is doing it.
Yeah, yeah. And this has been going on for so long. These cooks have been cooking in so many kitchens for so long, and people have been enjoying that food. And there's some who try to duplicate it and replicate it, but they can't unless they get the cookbook. And I do want to say that many of our participants are commenting in the chat room about the cookbooks that they purchased. So, we got a lot of foodies participating today. And speaking of foodies, Basada, you call yourself a foodie, but I think you are an old school foodie because you cook the foods that you like. Now, some people who are foodies order the food that they like these days. So you're old school, you're tradition, you go back and you know what you're doing, and you know exactly what's in your food because you're actually cooking it yourself.
Yeah, well, so we have different varieties of foodies, but we're all foodies. So that's a good thing. Well, when you're talking about those cooks that haven't gotten their due, I have to mention Kelly Fanto Dietz's book. And her book is called Bound to the Fire: How Enslaved Virginia Cooks Contributed to American Cuisine. And she has just really looked at all of the things that our folks contribute to what is just now very broadly American cuisine. And so I just want to shout out to Kelly Dietz. She's done such a fantastic job. She is actually the director of education at Stratford Hall, which is the Robert E. Lee birthplace, but she is making sure that the stories of the enslaved population are told. And so, but her own book is Bound to the Fire.
She was here earlier, right?
Huh?
Pardon?
She was here earlier in Richmond. Is that the one we were talking?
Yes, she actually at the Virginia. I have to remember to say this, not the Virginia Historical Society anymore, but the Virginia Museum of History and Culture. Yeah,
Right.
she spoke earlier this year, probably just before the pandemic, January or February.
Well, all right. Now we would like to avail the opportunity for some of our participants to ask questions. If you have any, feel free to put them to chat them, and we will try to get them answered for the time that we have left. Bonnie, how are we on time?
Let's see. It's 7:25, so we have about 10 minutes or so for
Okay, all
questions.
right.
That time
Anybody
went
have?
by really quickly.
It did. Well, you know, the content is so good, the information is so great. And it's like Barbara Rollins, one of our participants, said, when you listen to Basada talk about the traditions of her family and the things that they did and how everybody was so engaged and involved, it really does take you back to whatever traditions you had when it came to cooking and celebrations and holidays. Because I'm remembering, you know, one of our family traditions, every Thanksgiving morning and every Christmas morning, we'd have oyster stew.
Yeah.
Oyster stew every Christmas morning and every Thanksgiving morning. And here's
Yeah.
the deal about that. You know, we couldn't afford a whole lot of oysters, but we had oyster stew. Now, I may get one or two oysters. My sisters and brothers may get one or two. But my daddy got about 5 or 6 oysters in his oyster stew. So that's one of the traditions that we used to laugh about because they were good days and we really enjoyed that. So many traditions, so many.
Wow, that's wonderful.
Well, let's see. I'm looking for no more questions.
Anyone want to raise their hand with a question?
Let me let me weigh in. I saw that someone had put in the chat something about, let's see, Pamela's. What's the name of that book? I saw it. Pamela's
Soul
Soul
Food,
Food
Princess
Cookbook.
Pamela's Soul Food Cookbook.
Yeah, and that's an old one, so that is fantastic. If you have a copy of that, that's one that I have. You know, it's an old. It's hard to find it too much anymore. You know, you may find it. You know, on eBay or somewhere, but that's the kind of, that was one of those early cookbooks. I mean, we first started to get them in the 1970s. And so that is great. Hold on to Pamela.
So these cookbooks are, many of them that you speak of seem to be rare cookbooks and definitely very valuable, not only of substance and content, but you got to be proud to have a collection like that. Do you keep them in a specific place at your house, your collection of cookbooks?
Well, somewhat. I keep them in specific places because there are too many of them for a
Uh-huh.
single specific place. But it's interesting, as I was looking just today when Bonnie, we were talking about some of the celebrity cookbooks, I went online and looked at the Mahalia Jackson cookbook, and it is worth a fortune. You know, it's
Really?
published probably about, I don't know, 50, probably 50 years ago now. I have to look at it. But, you know, some are worth a lot, you know, on the market, and some are not. I saw something I was looking at today. I think one of the National Council of Negro Women, and there was one on eBay or some site for $4.99, and a used, of course they were all used copies. And so yeah, some are you know, and I guess it's supply and demand. One cookbook, then of course it's so different now, the way that we can search for cookbooks. I used to have book dealers around the country, a couple of specialists who dealt with cookbooks in New York City, and they'd always have a list of, this is what I'm looking for. And there was a local mom and pop operation out on just off of Grove Avenue, near well, yeah, at Grove Avenue near St. Catherine's School. And they would always keep a list of, this is what I'm looking for. They call me and let me know. There was a book dealer in Ann Arbor, Michigan, so I kind of knew who across the country dealt in cookbooks. But now that you can search online, then that makes the finding process just a little bit different. Um, But so they're out there. You can tell, what's available and at what price.
Now, Antoinette talked about another a Food Network. Let's see, who is it? Cardi, Miss Brown from Edisto Island in South Carolina. That low country cooking, that's a whole nother different kind of cooking, that low country cooking. I remember living in South Carolina, and there are things that were made in South Carolina that you had no idea what it was, but it had the flavor. It was good, and I guess they all have their own flavor, and they are good. But it's like you said, there must be demand now for cookbooks, particularly with African American chefs, because they're widely available now.
Right, they are. So people are publishing them. Of course, when you talk about the low country cuisine, then that reminds us that there is no one African American cuisine. African American cuisine is many things, and that's one of the things that they do in the Sweet Home Cafe, is the food is curated so that there are foods from the different cultures within the diaspora. And so certainly, of course, my cookbook collection, I've got the African cookbooks, and of course that's many cultures as well, but I kind of group them, the continent, together, but they're all over the African continent. I've got the Caribbean and South America, those cookbooks, and then all the different cuisines here in the continental United States, and there are many. I mean, you got the cooking in Dalfusky, and you got New Orleans, and you got just so many different cultures that are all different.
Yeah, that is the response. Asia Blue asked a question about the different influences of the various tribes of the Caribbean foods and the spices and all. So you really just responded to that about, the different flavors and the difference of those. So
one of the
people want to know about, go ahead.
One of the things that we've done in our household is embraced Jamaican cuisine. And so in our my husband makes hot sauce, made with Scotch bonnet peppers. He wouldn't use any other, it has to be authentic. And that is actually too hot for my taste. But so we do the jerk chicken, we do the rice and peas, all of, so that's a particular cuisine. And we try to be diverse, but that's one particular one that we have embraced.
Now, I want to make a correction. The pronunciation of the cook is a chef, excuse me, is Cardia Brown. Cardia. I think I called her Cardi. Cardia
Okay.
Brown is who she, yeah. So, well, I think the clock is ticking, but it's 2020. It's the holiday season. We all have lived with comfort and traditions over the years. We know this is going to be a different celebration, but there is a common denominator that we will all be able to enjoy during this holiday season, Thanksgiving and Christmas. And that is the fact that we will have food on the table. So we are definitely thankful for that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Poseidon, thank you so much for being here. You shared a wealth of information, and there were other questions, and there's so much to be said. We'll have to do this again next year. Okay, Bonnie?
With pleasure. With pleasure. Yes.
Yeah, Kitchen Talk is an event that BND sponsors every year. So we are thankful to be able to do this and bring the information to those who are interested, and so many people are interested. And we also want to thank our sponsor, Michael Harvey, and all who participated in making this happen. And we want to wish everybody a happy holiday and delicious Thanksgiving and a safe and blessed Christmas. And we want to encourage you to be safe out there and wear your mask because it does help. Bonnie, did you want to make any closing comments?
Well, don't forget New Year's, because we have a lot of traditions and traditional foods that come with the new year. Your black-eyed peas and your greens and whatever other meat you may want to have, and that cornbread, of course. So we got to keep that in mind. But I just want to thank everyone for participating. I'm thrilled that you decided to join us tonight. This event is recorded, and so I'll probably post it on my website, make it available online. I am thinking about taking some of the comments and, maybe even writing a short news story about, some of the things that we talked about. Because again, me being a journalist and besides being a historian and all of the other smart people who are on this program tonight, we just have to do our jobs, due diligence, and preserve all of this information and pass it along. Because I know that I wish I had half the recipes my grandmother used to concoct when I was a little girl, working along with. Well, I didn't really work in the tobacco fields. I always found an excuse to be up under her in the kitchen. In Roxborough, North Carolina, Person County. So, and Mickey, I think we have a connection somewhere along.
I think we're related, Barney. I think we're related. That's where my family's from, Person County, Roxbury, North Carolina.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
So, but again, thank you very much. And do visit the website to see the video that will be going up as well. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay patient. All right. Thank you again. Take care.
God bless.